Recording here. Duly noted. Okay. All right. Welcome, everyone. This is the Boston Product Management Association's first event of 2023. So that's very exciting. I'm Adam Schulman with the BPMA team, and I think we're jumping right into the new year with a very powerful event and a really distinguished guest speaker today, right off the bat. But just a little bit before we get to that, for a bit about the BPMA. If you're here, you probably have at least heard of us, but maybe you're joining for the first time. So the BPMA is Boston's leading professional association for product management and product marketing. We host events like this one, sometimes also in person, and we also share content on our website and social media. For example, the Product Hub blog, which I really encourage you to check out. There's great content on there, including a bit about our speaker today and the topic that they're going to cover. We also have a number of other helpful offerings that really are to connect our community members. There's a mentorship program and also a job board that can be very helpful depending on the stage of career you're in. And we also have a number of related groups and communities like the Product Executive Forum. I'm personally a member of that and I love it. And Product Camp, which is an awesome event. But this wouldn't be possible without our supportive sponsors. There's a lot of big and notable names here in both product management and marketing, and we greatly appreciate their support to make all of this possible. So thank you to our sponsors. And because this is the first event of 2023, we just thought we'd do a quick recap of the events last year. Despite everything going on in the world, we had 13 events total, including 2 in person, hard to believe, right? Covering a wide range of topics. We had over 20 blog posts. We offered weekly newsletters and all kinds of other activities. So it was a very busy year, despite the challenges in the world. And this is probably a good time to mention the survey, because we also want to hear from you to make sure that we're continuing to deliver the types of events and content that you find useful. So look for a link to the survey in the chat after the presentation, and please fill that out to help us make sure that we're providing what you're looking for as far as content goes. And I should also mention that I'm joined here by Hillary and Prachi from the BPMA team. So we'll have a Q&A at the end of the presentation, but they'll be watching the chat window for your questions when we get to the Q&A. Okay, one last bit of preamble. After today's event, the next event is February 22nd, and the focus of that is product quality. And who doesn't need to worry about product quality? So I'm sure this will be very useful to all of us, no matter the type of business that you're in. And we look forward to seeing you there. So please mark your calendars. Okay, so moving on to our distinguished guest for today, April Dunford. My personal experience with April's work started when I read her book, Obviously Awesome. And it really turned my thinking on product positioning and the approach, I mean, literally inside out. As far as the process and thinking goes. And then I took a positioning course that she taught and really loved it for the same reason, was just able to get deeper into the thinking and methodology and apply it to my own work. And in fact, her work was so impactful that we wrote a blog post about her book and that topic a few months ago. And after that, we reached out to April on the off chance that she'd be interested in speaking to us. And to our amazement, she wrote back personally, offering to do it. And that's a big deal because April is very much in demand, whether it's for speaking engagements or working with companies around the world. In fact, when we spoke to April to set up this webinar, she had just flown back from, I think it was the UK, and was going to get on a plane soon after, and has a very busy schedule. So we are very grateful that April is sharing her time with us. Welcome, April. This is going to be an awesome talk, and the stage is yours.
Oh, that's such a nice introduction. All right. Well, thanks so much. I'm super happy to be here. Let me share my screen and we'll see if that works. Seeing stuff there, something that says positioning for growth. Oh, good.
Yep.
So I'm super happy to be here. Never spoke here before. And it is fun to do these where I don't have to get on a plane. Right now, it feels like I'm on a plane a lot. In fact, today I was prepping for this and I was like, I haven't done a virtual one in a while. I feel out of practice. So let's see how this goes. I'm going to walk through this presentation. We're talking a bit about positioning, why it's important, what you got to think about, and a little bit about my methodology for actually doing it. And talk itself is maybe half an hour or so. And then hopefully we got 15, 20 minutes at the end for questions. So if you got a question, you can either throw it in the chat now or wait till the end and put it in the chat, but we'll get to the questions at the end. Positioning. It's funny because I'm the positioning consultant, and the funny thing about being the positioning expert is nobody knows what positioning is. So, or worse, they think they know what it is and they're wrong. So people will say, "Oh yeah, positioning. I know what that is. It's messaging," and I'll be like, "Not really the same thing." Or they'll say, "Well, I know what that is. It's like I once had a CEO argue with me that it's everything we do in marketing is positioning." And I'm like, "No, dude, there's a lot of things we do that don't actually have anything to do with that." And my personal pet peeve is when people talk about brand positioning, which really bugs me because I think there's positioning and there's branding, but those two things are separate. In fact, a lot of the stuff that people confuse with positioning are actually things we want to do with positioning once we have it, but positioning is an input to that. You can think of it a little bit like this. We got a whole bunch of stuff we're doing in marketing and sales. The positioning is kind of the foundation upon which that stuff is built. This is my not very good definition of positioning, but like humor me on this. So positioning defines how our product is the best in the world at providing something, some value that a well-defined set of customers cares a lot about. Now that's kind of a mouthful, and a lot of times I'm dealing with CEOs or people that don't have a marketing background at all, and so I've got a lot of different analogies that I use for positioning, but the one that I like to use the most is it's like context setting for products. Context is important because that's kind of how we make sense of the world. In fact, that's really how we make sense of things we've never come across before. We'll look for clues in the context to try and figure out what that thing is all about. I'll give you an example. This is a product that I once encountered completely out of context, surfing around on Amazon. And I came across this thing and I was laughing my head off. I was like, look at that. You know what I thought this was? I thought this was a shoe. So I thought, Crocs, they're all about the super ugly shoes. And they're just going to double down on that ugly shoe thing. And they're like, how can we make it uglier? Oh, we'll have your toes hanging out and we'll stick this thing around the back that's super ugly. And that's what we've got. And then I saw the thing in context and I was like, oh, that's not what it is at all. And all of a sudden it became obvious what the thing is and what it's good for. Like what it is a dog muzzle, and what it's good for is, I don't know, embarrassing your dog in public, I think mainly is what that's good for. And then it's funny, like if I show you this, and that now you kind of got that as context, and then I show you this product, like you might say, oh, well, I get this now. She's into dog stuff. And so this is like one of those cones you put on your dog, when he comes back from the vet and, you don't want him to get at himself. It's a dog thing. And it turns out it's actually for people. And what this is it's like you go to the noodle house and you put this thing on and it's supposed to stop the noodles from dripping on you or something. I don't actually know what it's for, but what's really funny about this ad and what I like a lot is they're giving you some context about the value here, I think. And so the context is that guy. See that guy in the background? And that's how you know what this is good for. This thing is actually good for making people fall in love with you. Yeah, it doesn't work, but that's the idea. Sometimes the marketers lie, but the point here is that a shift in positioning can really change the way we think about a product. So I'll give you an example of this. Like we don't have everything at our disposal in terms of setting context for products, but one of the big things we have is market categories. So if I tell you my product sits in a certain market category, you'll make a bunch of assumptions about it. Market categories help customers kind of figure out what it is they should pay attention to. Everybody likes to show this slide. This is like an old version. This is 2-year-old version of this slide, but this is like the MarTech landscape. And every year this guy puts out this thing, and it's like, if you imagine all the software and all the land to solve all the problems, this is one guy's attempt at modeling just the software to solve marketing problems, like just that little corner of the universe. And like, look at this thing, it's terrifying. There's like 8,000 solutions on there. If you were a VP marketing trying to buy something, like, how do you ever figure this out? Like, how on earth do you make a short list? So market categories are one of the ways we do that. And you can see even he's tried to sort it out. Like, the colors are sort of macro categories, like the orange is content and experience, and the red is advertising and promotion. And then he's got these micro categories, which are the islands in there. So let's say I'm a VP marketing. I wake up in the morning and I'm like, ooh, this website needs a chat bot. I need live chat on the website. I look at this thing and go, oh God, what do I pay attention to here? And sure enough, I think, maybe that's a bit like social or relationships or something. And oh yeah, sure enough, there's a little island in there and it's called conversational marketing and chat. Great. Now I don't have to pay attention to all 8,000 things. I just pay attention to, frankly, it's still way too many. Like, look at how many are in there, but it ain't 8,000 anymore. I've significantly reduced it. Now, here's the thing. That's not all positioning your product in a certain market category does. Like, sure, it narrows down the competition, but what it actually does is it sets off a really powerful set of assumptions in the minds of customers about what your thing is all about. It works a bit like this. So let's say I'm doing one of those pitch contest shows. I always get confused because in Canada, we call it one thing. In the US, we call it, I think it's Shark Tank in the US and Dragon's Den in Canada. I think the UK calls it Dragon's Den too. Let's say it's a pitch contest, except it's a weird pitch contest. And all I can tell you is my market category. So I walk in and I go, hey, I'm April. I'm here to pitch you this amazing, revolutionary, next generation. Ooh, the world's never seen it before. CRM, customer relationship management. And that's it. That's all I'm allowed to say. Now, who's my competition? Well, it's Salesforce, right? They're the leader in that market. You said, well, you're a CRM, they're a CRM, you're probably going to compete with them. And so, what are the features that you would expect this CRM to have? Well, I expected to track accounts, track deals across a pipeline, CRM stuff, right? What is the title of the buyer that I sell this to? Well, it's probably the VP sales or the head of sales. That's who buys a CRM. Now, here's where it gets crazy. Like, what is the price on this thing? No, how would you know? I didn't tell you anything about the product, nothing. But if you assume I'm competing with Salesforce because you assume they're the market leader, I'm not going to charge more than that, am I? So here's how this works. If I do a good job, I position myself in a market category. It sets off a set of assumptions about my product, and those assumptions are true. Well, great. I just saved marketing and sales, all this hassle. I don't have to tell you who my competitor is. It's assumed. I don't have to list every single feature. Half of that stuff is table stakes. Unfortunately, it works the same way if I do a terrible job of it. So let's say I position myself in a market category, sets off a set of assumptions about my product that are not true. Well, now marketing and sales have their work cut out for them, trying to undo the damage that this positioning has already done. So let me give you an example of this. So I get this call from old boss of mine, who's now a VC in Silicon Valley, calls me up and he says, oh, April, I just invested in this company and I love them. And one of the things I love the most about them is customers love them. So I did all these interviews with the customers love them. The problem is when they have a first call with a prospect, nobody can figure out what this thing is and they're super confused. So maybe that's positioning. Maybe you could help them. I'm like, sure, let's get them on the phone. So we get the guys on the phone and I'm like, hey, what's your story? And they're like, we're lawyers, ex-lawyers. Now we're software guys and we have this product and it's email for lawyers. And I'm like, my first thought is, who knew the lawyers needed their own special email? But what do I know? I'm not a lawyer, thank God. So, all right, email for lawyers. Then they jump into the demo and they're showing me the demo. And the demo looks cool. There's kind of an inbox thing and there's a conversations that are going on between the lawyers and their clients. And I'm like, hey, this is cool. Like, how does the calendar work on this email for lawyers? And the CEO says, oh, we don't have a calendar. And I'm like, wait a minute. So how do you replace Gmail if you don't have a calendar? And he goes, oh, we don't actually compete with Gmail at all. I'm like, so you're telling me you want the emails to use you want the lawyers to use 2 emails? And at this point, I'm super confused. I'm like, I don't get it at all. Then I'm like, okay, well, back up. Your investor called me in and he said, everybody loves your stuff. So what's everybody love about your stuff so much? He said, well, actually, we got this thing. It's cool. It's this neat technology. We actually have a patent on it. And what it does is you got the lawyers, you got their clients, and they're collaborating on documents. And those documents are confidential. And so what this thing does is it figures out who needs to have access to the documents and who doesn't, puts them in a super secure place. And only the people that are supposed to access it get access to it. And they got some name for it, super secure, context aware file sharing thing. And I'm like, that actually sounds cool. And not only that, I get why the lawyers might be super excited about it. But you know what that doesn't sound like? Email. Like if I want to do that thing, would I actually buy email to solve that problem? I don't think you would. So what we have here is this amazing product that customers love, that's really differentiated, that has all this cool stuff, and it's masquerading as kind of shitty email. It doesn't even have a calendar. So what if we took this product and we picked it up and we just plopped it into another market category? So let's say instead of email for lawyers, this thing is team collaboration for lawyers. Now that's different. Right. So now, like I say that, and that's a whole different starting point for a conversation. Do you compete with Gmail now? No, you're kind of competing with Slack and Teams, and that's different. Do I expect you to have a calendar? No, of course not. What I expect you to have is some kind of jazzy thing that lawyers need to collaborate with their clients. And that's exactly what they have in this super secure, context-aware file sharing thing. Cool thing about this was what the impact on the pricing, right? The original thing when they're positioning as email really drove the price down in the minds of customers. They switched to team collaboration. People are used to paying more for that. So we actually had this fun conversation. I was like, you know what? I can make the argument that because you're this very specialized team collaboration, that you could make the argument that you could maybe charge more than Slack for this. And I said, oh, you know what you should do? You get the lawyers on the phone. When you get the lawyers on the phone and they say, how much does it cost? You say, look, we have special pricing and we priced it in a way that lawyers can understand. So we're actually going to charge you by the minute. And then you just let that dangle. And then the lawyers go, oh, that's not fair. And you say, I know. Anyways, they didn't do that, but I thought that was a missed opportunity. So the point here is that we rarely position our products deliberately. We wake up in the morning and we're like, hey, what are we building? We're building email. We're building email. And that's what it is. And we just keep building it that way. And the next thing we know, the market has changed. The product has changed. The context has changed. Customers coming at it, look at it, and they're like, I don't know, you're calling that email, but I'm not sure that's what it is. This is another example. So it's a company I worked with a while back, but started by 3 guys with degrees in mechatronics engineering. They're robot guys, and they come out and they decide they're going to have this startup and they're making robots. And what these robots do is they drive around a manufacturing plant and it delivers things from one place to the other. Now, if you're not super into robot stuff like me, maybe you think that doesn't sound too hard of a problem to solve. It turns out this thing is a miracle of modern technology, is full of mapping and sensors and artificial intelligence. It's a genius thing. And so anyways, they're selling it to the people inside a manufacturing plant that buy robots. So they show up. The name of the company is ClearPath Robotics. They show up. Hi, we're ClearPath Robotics, and we're here to sell you some fancy new robots. And the CEO tells this story funny. He says, you know, we walk in and we start the pitch like that. And the person in charge of buying robots is kind of like this. Robots. Yeah, robots, man. You know what? We've been buying robots for decades around here. And you know what we got? We got approved robot vendors. And you're not one of them. And we know what robots cost. And your thing is way too expensive. And blah, 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 blah. And they're like, ClearPath guys are like, no, you don't understand. They're like special robots, special artificial intelligence, like no robot you've ever seen before. And so it was taking them multiple conversations before the light would come on and the customer would be like, okay, now I get what you're talking about. So eventually team goes back to the drawing board and they're like, look, maybe calling this thing a robot isn't really helping us. So what could we position it as? So they lean back and they said, well, what makes us different and special? It's mobility. The fact that it drives around. It's mapping, sensors, artificial intelligence. What drives around and is full of mapping, sensors, and artificial intelligence? And eventually they landed on this idea, maybe what we've built here is a self-driving car, or as they describe it, autonomous vehicles for industrial uses. That's a totally different starting point for the customer. So now they come in and they're like, hey, we got this thing here. It's a self-driving car for manufacturing. And it's a totally different place to start with the customer. The customer's like, of course it drives around. Of course it's full of mapping and sensors. Of course I don't get it from the same vendor that sells me an arm that picks up a jar of vitamins and puts it in a box. These guys have a funny story too about, if you look at how they really gone to town on this positioning, like they renamed the name of the device is now called Auto to match to this idea that this thing is actually a car. And if you look at the industrial design of the device, it's got white headlights on the front and red brake lights on the back. And those do absolutely nothing. It's a robot. It doesn't need headlights or brake lights, but that's just there to drive home this idea that this thing is a self-driving car. Now, if we think positioning is important, how do we actually do it? And this, my friends, is a question that vexed me for a very long time in my career. So I started out, I do not have a degree in marketing. I have a degree in systems design engineering. But when I came out of school, I landed a job at a startup. I'm working at a startup. And one of the first things we did was we had a product and we repositioned it. And we had no idea what we were doing. And we kind of mucked around. And after a while, we got super lucky, landed on some positioning that worked. The product took off. We got acquired by this great big company in Silicon Valley. Everyone's happy. I got this big promotion. Everybody's reporting to me now. I'm like a vice president of marketing now. And they give me a bunch of products and they're like, hey, do that thing you did for the other one and reposition these products. And I was like, well, shit, man, I'm going to have to learn how to actually do this because we just mucked around the last time. So I thought, okay, I'm going to learn how to do it. So I go and have coffee with every smart marketing executive I know. And I go back to school and I take some courses and I read a bunch of books. And the closest thing I ever got to a methodology for positioning is this thing. It's called the positioning statement. So the first time I came across this, I'm sitting in class I took this marketing class at Northwestern University, fancy marketing school. Guy comes in, he says, today's the day we're going to learn about positioning. I'm like, right on, we're going to do it today. So he walks up, he puts this thing up and it's like this Mad Libs fill in the blanks thing. We are a blank that does blank, unlike blank, blankety blank, blank. And the blanks are things like the market category and your differentiated value and who you compete against and stuff like this. And so I'm sitting at the back and the guy's explaining it. There's all these blanks. And what you do is you fill in the blanks and then you're done. And then he's moving on to the next subject. And I'm like, no, wait. So I'm at the back, I put my hand up and he's like, what? And I'm like, but wait, there's a blank there that says market category. Like I had just repositioned a product that we thought it was desktop productivity software. And we repositioned it as an embeddable database for mobile devices. Very different market category. So you're saying I just write down what I think, but I mean, as far as I can tell, every product could be successfully positioned in multiple different market categories. How do I know I got the best one? And you know what the guy said to me? The guy gave me this whole professor thing. You know, he's got his glasses on and he's like, who said that? And I'm like, me, I'm at the back. And I said, how do you know? How do you know? And he says, trust me, April, you'll just know. And I'm like, that's what smart people say when they don't know the answer, man. So at that point, I was like, hey, we don't know. We actually don't know how to do this thing. Now, at this point, I had repositioned 3 or 4 products. And I figured maybe I can figure this out because I'm like that. So, so I decided, well, let's approach this. I got an engineering degree. So I'm like, let's approach this like an engineering problem. How would we solve it? Well, we would break positioning apart into component pieces, solve for the pieces, smash it together, voila, good positioning. How hard could it be? So it turns out breaking it into piece parts isn't that hard because we kind of agree on what the piece parts are, and they're more or less the blanks in the positioning statement. So what we've got are 5 things. The first one is competitive alternatives. What would the customer do if you didn't exist? So what are you competing against? Second thing is unique attributes, capabilities, features. What do you got that the other guys don't have? The next one is value. Customers don't buy you because of your fancy features. They buy you for the value that those features enable. So what do you have that's differentiated value that you can enable for customers that no one else can? The next thing is customer segments. We're not trying to sell to everybody. We're trying to sell to the part of the market that's a really good fit for our stuff. So how do we define that? Then the last one's market category. Am I email or team collaboration? Am I a robot or self-driving car? So those are the 5 things, no problem. All we got to do now is solve for the thing, each of them, put it together. So the minute you ask yourself that question, then you start seeing where this gets complex. So the first thing you'll notice is that the 5 things are not independent. They actually have a relationship to each other. So let's take value. The value that your product can deliver that no one else can comes from where? Comes from your differentiated capabilities. Like, we don't get to just make this up. It comes from the capabilities of the company or the capabilities of the product that you have that the others don't have. So those 2 things, I can't figure out one without figuring out the other. Now, if I start thinking about it though, differentiated capabilities or attributes, well, those are only differentiated or unique when I compare them to the competitor. So those things are all tied. So now I got and then if I think about it, my best fit customer segment, well, who are they? Well, they're the people that care a lot about the value that only I can deliver. That's what makes them a good fit for my stuff. So that thing's tied too. I can't figure out that without knowing the value. And then market category is a little bit more esoteric, but when you think about it, my best market category, if I think about that like context setting, my best market category is the context that I position my product in such that my differentiated value is kind of obvious to the customers I'm trying to go after. So everything has a relationship to everything else. Where do you start? So, and for 2 years, I decided there's no good starting point here. That's why that guy couldn't teach me that in class. There is no starting point. This is a spiral. I pick a starting point. I work my way around the circle. I get candidate positioning. I take it out to the market. I test it. If it works, great. We run with it. If it doesn't, I throw it out and I come back and I work my way around and I do it again. Now, big problems with this, let me tell you. So I'm the brand new vice president of marketing, right? I come in and say, hey, let's fix the positioning. I do this thing. If we get it right on the first try, I'm a hero. Everybody loves me. Oh, that new VP of marketing, she's amazing. If I get it wrong and we just spent 2-3 months building the thing, testing the thing, whatever, and then I got to go back to the CEO and say, oh yeah, that thing we've been working on for the last couple of months, wasted effort. We're going back to the drawing board to do it again, which is a very good way of getting fired. So this was not fun 2 years. And here's how I finally got out of this. It's a really long story, but you're product people, so maybe I'll give you the short version. The short version is I got super into Clayton Christensen and Jobs to Be Done. And so I went way down the Jobs to Be Done rat hole. I met all these people that are super smart on Jobs to Be Done. I got deep thinking about Jobs to Be Done. And the short version is what I came up with is this. And basically it looks like this. We have to start with competitive alternatives. If we do not start with competitive alternatives, we will end up with positioning that sounds good in the office, but it doesn't work in the market because it is insufficiently differentiated from the other choices that a customer has. And so it works like this. We start with competitive alternatives. So if you didn't exist, what would a customer do? Or put another way, what do I have to beat in order to win a deal? And then once I've got that, then I can say, all right, well, what do we have that they don't have? Capabilities of the company, capabilities of the product, all these things. I can make a great big list of those. We're tech people. That's easy. We love talking about features. Then I can go down that list of features and map the features to value. And so for every feature, I say, so what? Why does a customer care? What is the value that that feature enables? And what I'm looking for are the themes. So what I'll end up with there is, look, we're the only offering on the planet that can do this, this, and this in combination. That's my differentiated value. Once I have that, then I can say, look, we can go sell this thing to anybody that has this problem, but not everybody cares about our value the same. So what are the characteristics of a target account that make them really, really care a lot about the value that only we can deliver? That's my definition of a best fit customer. And then once I got value of best fit customers, then I can say, all right, well, what is the context that I position that product in such that that value is obvious to these customers? Now, it sounds easy, but there's still a million ways to screw this up. The most common way is in the very first step, this idea of competitive alternatives. So most of the time, we're used to thinking about competitors as things that we compete against directly, things that look just like us. But one of the big things you learn from Jobs to Be Done is, like, a lot of the times, the alternatives are things that look nothing like you. So in B2B software, for example, we're almost always competing with Excel or pen and paper, manual processes. So about once a week, I'll get a company that comes to me, little early stage startup will come to me and say, hey, we got this thing, and I'll say, well, who do you compete with? And they'll give me this big long list of little dinky companies I've never heard of. And I'll say, well, how do you beat them? And they'll say, ease of use. These other ones, you want to do a thing, it takes 59 clicks. But if you do it with us, it's one click, super easy to use. It's amazing. And I'll be like, look, I never heard of any of these guys. Like, do you actually lose deals to them? And sometimes they'll just say, no, we don't actually know. We don't lose deals to them. And I'm like, well, you don't win every deal. Like, what do you lose deals to? And they'll say, oh, well, we lose deals to no decision. And I'm like, well, what does that mean? Like, what's the customer doing if you lost to no decision? They're like, oh, they're just hiring an intern to do it. That means you lost to the intern. So think about it. You're positioning around ease of use. Do you beat the intern on ease of use? No way, man. The intern is like the easiest thing. The intern's like, Joey, get me a coffee, fill out the spreadsheet, come back when you're done. No, but there's a ton of things that your product does that's probably way better than the intern, right? The intern makes mistakes. The intern quits on you. The intern knows nothing about the history of your dealings with the company or whatever. Like, as long as you understand that the intern is part of your competition, then you can position against it. There's other things, but I'm going to give you a last example. And the last example is about what happens when you understand your competitive alternatives, you understand what makes you different, you just don't really understand the value of that thing that makes you different. So this is and if you're super interested in this, I wrote a book, like, for $7, you can learn everything I know about this. But anyways, this is the story. So I worked at this, I tell this story all the time. So if you ever heard me talk, you've heard me tell this story. This is my favorite story, so I continue to tell it. So early in my career, I got this job. I'm working at this company and we sell enterprise CRM. That's our thing. Now, this was ages ago. I've been doing this a long time. This was an early job, but so enterprise CRM at the time, Salesforce was around, but they were only selling to small companies. And so there was this big competitor at the time, 2 billion revenue, this big company called Siebel. So that was our big competitor, Siebel. And so unsurprisingly, we're positioned as enterprise CRM. They are the undisputed king of enterprise CRM. So every time we get a meeting with a client or a prospect says, so how are you better than Siebel? And the answer is, we're not. Like, we're just not. Like, they've been around for like 10 years. We're brand new. They got 400 customers. We have like 6. They do 2 billion revenue. We have like less than 2 million revenue at the time. But we had 2 things that we thought were really differentiating. One was we had this feature. It was really jazzy. And what it could do is it could model relationships between people in a different way than any other CRM in the market. So we could model many-to-many relationships between people. All the other CRMs are modeling people to companies. And so, and not only that, it looks great. So when we demo it, it looks kind of sexy. So whenever we go in, we got a meeting with the customer, we demo the thing, and customers like it. And they go, oh, that looks really cool. And then they'd say, what do you use that for? And we would say, anything you want, because we didn't know. So we knew who the competitor was. We knew what our differentiator was. We had no idea what the value was. And we were hoping for customers to figure it out for us. And so then what would usually happen is the customer would go, well, what else have you got? And then we had our other differentiator, which was absolute desperation to close a deal. And so, if you ask for a discount, we give you one. So we were like cheap. Like at one point I had clients say, oh, I get what you are. You're like the cheap, crappy Siebel. I was like, that sucks. Anyway, so needless to say, things aren't going so good. And we're not selling very much. And not only are we not selling very much, we have a hard time keeping salespeople because, you know, if you don't sell anything, the salesperson gets fired or they quit. Anyways, how we got out of this was a new salesperson. So salesperson shows up and for the interview, and the guy is from New York, and he's got a bit of an attitude. And so he shows up, and my CEO is like one of these guys who's a jerk in interviews. And so this guy shows up for the interview, and my CEO sits down across from him, and he says, give me one good reason why we should hire you to be a sales rep at our company. And this guy from New York got all up in his face and said, I'll give you one good reason. And the reason is my buddy is the head of investment banking at Goldman Sachs, and I'm going to get you a meeting. And we were like, sounds good. Start on Monday. And so we hire the guy. And then the guy gets us the meeting with the head of investment banking at Goldman Sachs. We're all happy. I tag along on the deal because I want to see how this pitch goes. So we go in. I also want to see what the office of the head of investment banking at Goldman Sachs looks like. And let me tell you, it's very impressive. There's a helicopter pad outside on the balcony. It's cool. Anyway, so we go in, we're having the meeting. My rep's doing a fantastic job. He gets to the point where he's in demo the thing, and he demos the thing, and the guy gets all squinty eyed and he's like, wait. So are you saying if two people work at different companies, but they sit on a board together, you could model that? We're like, yeah. He's like, so like if two people were the member of the same golf club, but they don't work at the same company, you could model that in your CRM. We're like, yeah. And he's like, hang on, I need the vice presidents. Runs down the hall, comes back with a couple of vice presidents and says, show them the thing. So we show them the thing, our feature, and they get all excited. And they're like, wait, so if two people, you know, used to work together, but they don't work together anymore, but they're drinking buddies, you could actually model that in your CRM. We're like, yeah, we can do that. Everybody gets all excited and we close the deal. It's a miracle. And we're like, this is good. This has never happened to us. Maybe the investment bankers dig our stuff. So we go pitch to another investment bank, Merrill Lynch. The exact same thing happens. We get to the spot where we show them the thing, head of investment banking, it's super excited. We close a big deal. So what we learn in this process is if it is a very heavily relationship-driven sale, this ability to manage relationships between people to people is actually super, super important for driving business. They even have a name for this inside investment banking. It's called reason to call. Anyways, once we figure that out, we crack the code. Now we're selling like crazy. Importantly, it drove this discussion back at headquarters about what are we? Are we really just enterprise CRM? Maybe we're CRM for investment banks. Now that might not sound like a big change to you, but let me tell you, internally, that was very hard for us to get our heads around. Like some people were like, well, wait a second, how many investment banks are there? Like, are we actually going to be able to grow? Like what happens if a telco calls us? Are we going to not do the deal with them? We had to convince the board, and the board had given us money on this thing, like we were going to be the kings of enterprise CRM and take out Siebel. So they're like, how's that going to work? And so here's how we explained it. Look, positioning is not something we carve into the rock and never touch again. So it is going to evolve over time. So we're going to focus on investment banking because that's where we can win right now. But once we've won investment banking, then we're going to start looking at retail banking because we're going to be the kings of investment banking. That gives us a right to go play in retail. Then we're going to be CRM for banking, not investment banking, banking. And if we win there, then we can stretch out to insurance. And now we're CRM for financial services. That's different. And if we win that, that is an enormous market. And we will then be a giant company. And then we're going to go take on Siebel head to head, and we'll be CRM for enterprise after that. People bought that story. We shifted the positioning, and it was absolutely transformational for the business. So first thing that happened was the bankers started calling us instead of us having to go to the bankers because they would find us. Second thing was we never got in a head-to-head deal with Siebel again. So how it worked was we'd walk in, we'd say, hey, we're CRM for investment banks. Investment bankers would get squinty-eyed and they'd be like, don't you compete with Siebel? And we'd be like, oh, Siebel. We love those guys. They're amazing. We love them. What a company. So big, so much revenue. So they're amazing. They're like the world's greatest general purpose CRM for like call centers and manufacturing plants and retailers or something. Not you, Wolf of Wall Street. You don't do business like that. You need something special. Let me show you this thing. And so revenue started going like this. We, at the end of the story is we went from 2 million to a little under 80 million in a bit less than 18 months. And then Cboe got so sick of us kicking their tail all up and down Wall Street that they came and acquired us for $1.3 billion. People didn't think we were going to make any money. That's it. That's the end of my story. That's all. I think we'll go to the questions if I can figure out how to stop sharing this. Ooh, look at all the boxes.
Thank you. Thank you, April, for the wonderful talk. It was so informational. And thank you for sharing all your personal stories. I'm looking at the chat. There are a few questions. The first one is how pricing comes into place to influence your positioning.
Yeah, like I think pricing and positioning, I think the pricing is very important to reinforce your positioning and vice versa. Like I've been through exercises where we repositioned a product and we actually had to raise the price in order for the customer to believe that we could service them in an enterprise way. If the price was too low, the expectation was, well, there wouldn't be 24/7 support and you wouldn't be able to get support in languages. And there was just this suspicion that you wouldn't be able to do what you could do. If you listen to, like, if you know Shopify, Shopify is a really interesting story about how they started Shopify Plus. And so what they were finding is that customers were getting to a certain size and they were migrating off Shopify because they felt like Shopify was just for small businesses and it couldn't do what they could do. And then they would go on to some bigger platform that was way more expensive, whatever, and it didn't really do what they wanted. And then they'd come back. And so when Shopify talked to them, they were like, it was just too cheap. We just didn't believe, like we thought there must be better things out there. And so when they first started Shopify Plus, which is their offering for enterprises, it really wasn't a change in the product as much as it was a change in the pricing and then a little bit of a change in the sales and service model. But it was mainly a pricing thing to signal, hey, we're for you guys too. So you can grow into us up there. So I think pricing matters a lot.
Okay, thank you. The next one is, when you start a new product, would you start with the value problem that the customer is looking for or start from a different starting point?
Well, so this is the thing. So I get people call me a lot when they're in it's a brand new product, like they haven't launched it yet. They're still trying to figure out what it is. And I don't think positioning is how you figure out what you're going to do. Like at the beginning, what you have is what I would call a positioning thesis. And so your thesis says, look, for this problem, this is who we're going to compete with. This is how we're different. This is the value we can deliver that no one else can. This is who we think is going to be really excited about that. And therefore, this is the market we're going to win. But it's just a thesis. And in fact, I believe that when you first launch a product, it's actually smarter. Like internally, you might have this thesis that's really quite tight. But externally, I think it's actually good to leave the positioning a little bit loose, and that way you can feel the market pull, because we're always wrong. Like when I was internal, I launched 16 different products. We never got it right once. And so my feeling was, so here's my bad analogy for this. It's like you woke up in the morning and you decided you're going to build a fishing net, right? And your thesis is it's a tuna fishing net. It's for catching tuna. It's the world's greatest tuna fishing net. Now I could launch that and position it as world's greatest tuna fishing net. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, man. And you don't really know yet until you get it launched. And so a better way to launch it, in my opinion, is to put it out and say, look, man, it's a net for fish, like all kinds of fish, big fish, probably, but I don't know. And then let's let a whole bunch of people try it out. And then let's just see what everybody pulls up. And maybe what we find out is like, ooh, actually, this thing is amazing for grouper. And we didn't know anything about grouper and we weren't thinking about grouper, but it turns out the thing is actually the world's greatest grouper fishing net. And we're just going to tighten up our positioning around that and run at that. So you're going to figure out what your product needs to do, and the positioning that maps to that. But I wouldn't get too concerned about having that positioning be over tightened, because you may actually be saying no to a part of the market that maybe you should say yes to. So your first wave is going to feel awkward because, sloppy positioning feels awkward. But I think you need to suffer through it for the first wave of customers until you start seeing the patterns and who loves your stuff and why. And then once you've got enough experience in the market, you can tighten it up and then go run at that segment.
Thank you. The next one is from Jyotsna. How would you go about finding that niche market to start with? And then how long to wait before you know it's the right time to quit because it's not the right market?
Right. So, going into it, you'll have a thesis, right? So you would have done your homework and your customer discovery, and your thesis would say, I think this is the niche that's going to love my stuff, and here's why, right? But then you launch it and you go and you try to sell to that niche, and then let's say it doesn't work. And then the question is, well, why? What is it that I assumed there that was going to work that didn't? Is it because my value isn't actually that valuable to them? Is it because they're actually comparing me to things that I didn't expect them to compare me to? Is it because what I thought was valuable, it turns out it isn't, or they're just prioritizing things in a different way that I didn't understand? And so I should be able to learn something from that to try and figure out how to shift my targeting. If I'm not selling anything, then all I'm learning is a whole bunch of no, right? These are things that people don't like. But what I'm looking for is, if I'm landing a handful of deals, I'm just not landing as many as I thought. Well, what's the difference between those handful of deals and all the ones that I lost? And so I like doing win analysis on this, because, loss analysis, if you're a startup, is kind of stupid. There's 1,000 reasons to say no to you, and there's only a very, very slender number of reasons to say yes. So if you want anything, I want to go back in and interview those people and say, take me back to what you were doing before. So what were you doing before? What made you get up in the morning and decide you couldn't keep doing it that way? And then when you decided you couldn't keep doing it that way, how did you go looking for a solution? How did you make a short list? And then I ended up on the short list with who? And then why'd you pick me? And importantly, why'd you not pick the other ones? Because sometimes it's not so much you won as that the other ones blew it. And so why did you not pick the other ones? And if what you want to do is be doing these interviews every time after you win a deal, and then you're looking for the patterns in that. And the pattern might show you people that are starting at this status quo are easier to close, or people that have this particular pain, we were using this status quo and then we started to grow. Oh, well, is it growth that actually makes your stuff more attractive? So you're looking for, what causes that struggling moment, the jobs guys will call it. What causes that struggling moment, and what can we learn about that? And then even, why did you win over the other folks? Or, maybe it's if I'm competing with these kind of competitors, I win. If I'm competing with these other ones, I don't. And so how can I adjust my targeting? So that's how I would go about it, is I'd launch it with my thesis. If my thesis is not proven out right, then I'm well, what's wrong about my thesis? There's something I'm assuming here that isn't right. Then I'd be doing win interviews to try to figure that out. And if I just can't find any, I'm looking for the love, who loves me and why. If I can't find any love, after doing that for a certain amount of time, then I'd be all right, maybe there was too many things wrong in this thesis and I got to go right back to the drawing board.
Thank you. A related question is, what guidance do you give companies about when to know if this is the right time to evolve your positioning?
Yeah. So, I used to be a repeat vice president of marketing. So, I get hired into the new VP marketing. And so what everybody wants you to do if you're the new VP marketing at a B2B software company is just go crazy on lead gen, right? So generate a whole bunch of leads for our sales team. And so for me, I didn't want to put a whole bunch of money, energy, and effort into lead generation if the positioning was bad, because that's kind of like pouring water into the leaky bucket. So I would try to do an assessment of whether the positioning was good or not. Now, I'm very B2B focused. So most of the companies I'd land in, we would have a sales team. And so the first thing I would do is I would go and listen to calls with the sales team. And if the weak positioning sounds like this, sales rep is on, customer gets on, sales rep's doing a pretty good job pitching the stuff. They get like 5-10 minutes into the sales call, and customers making a face like this, and then they're like, you'd hear this thing where they'd say, back it up, just go back to the beginning. Go back to I think I missed something. Go back to the beginning. And there's this, like, we have no idea what you are. Like, let's go back to square one. So that's the first thing you'd hear. The second thing you'd hear is almost worse, is they say, yeah, I get it. You're just like Salesforce, and you're nothing like Salesforce. Like, you're not in that market at all. So customers, sure, they know what you do and it's wrong, or they're comparing you to things they should never be comparing you to. Or you get the third one where the customers are like, yeah, I get it, but couldn't I just do that with a spreadsheet? Or couldn't I just do that with my accounting program? Like, so they get it ish. They just don't get the value. Like, they're just like, why would anyone pay for this? And so if I started hearing that in sales calls, then I would say we probably need to look at the positioning is probably mushy. So we need to go and fix it. The second thing is sometimes, and this would be dependent on whether or not I could convince the team to do it, but I think it's not a bad idea, even if you think your positioning is great, to get the gang together and sit down in a room and walk through it. Because maybe it's good, but maybe it could be better. Like, and if we've never done a formal exercise to tighten up the positioning, how do we know it's as good as it could be? So I don't think it's a wasted effort. The worst thing will happen is we'll confirm that the positioning is right. And, we spend a day on that. We all pat each other on the back and we go back to what we're doing. But I don't think it's wasted energy to do it. I just think it's hard to convince a CEO or your head of sales to look at it if it's not clearly broken. If I sit in on a bunch of sales calls and I'm hearing all this stuff, then what I would usually do is go out for lunch with the VP sales and say, look, I'm hearing this. And, do you see that? And usually the VP sales will agree with me. Like, yeah, you're right. We get compared to that. I don't know why. Or yeah, you're right. People don't understand the value. Or yeah, you're right. I don't know why. It takes us 3 calls and then the light goes on. And then I'd say, well, in marketing, we call that positioning. And I think we got a positioning problem. I think we should get the gang together and look at it. If I can convince the VP sales, and then usually I would go to the head of product after that and say, this is what I'm seeing. Did you see that? And if I could convince that person too, then I could go to the CEO and say, hey, I think this is worth spending a little time on. And usually the CEO would say, well, what does the VP sales say? And I say, I don't know. Why don't you call him? And then he calls the VP sales. The VP sales says, oh yeah, I was thinking about that. Yeah, we should. Yeah. And anyways, if you can convince other people on the executive team, then you can get some momentum behind looking at it. If it's good, it's hard to, and you don't have a reason to complain about it. It's hard to get people to actually stop for 5 minutes and look at it. Even though I think it's a worthwhile thing to do.
Okay, thank you. The next one's from Natalie. If you are a SaaS product with a bunch of functionality, do you go super granular with the market category, or do you have few product positioning for multiple key segments?
Yeah, so typically it's very hard to stake a claim in more than one market for more than one segment. It's actually really hard to do. It's hard to get the market to sort of understand what you are when you're one thing over here and you're another thing over here, and for the other people you're there. And from a marketing standpoint, it's almost impossible to maintain separate positioning. It's really hard to do. A lot of companies come to me and they think they have that. So they'll say, look, we have this product, but it's really different for really different segments. But when we go through the positioning, it turns out it's actually not that different. And here's the reason why. So let's say I've got a product and I got 2 different market segments, and the positioning really needs to be different, as in totally different competitors, totally different differentiated value. So the value over here is this, the value over here is something completely different, because the competitors over here are this, and the competitors over here are this. Therefore, totally different value, therefore totally different target market, therefore totally different market category, therefore totally different positioning. Do you know what else is different? Everything they want. So when you go back to those, so you got today one product serving these two very different things. But when you're trying to build a product roadmap for that, everybody wants something different. So what I have is a very big product strategy problem, because eventually I got a fork. I can't make them both happy forever. So if I really have that, then I got to decide how I'm going to do that. Like, is this two separate products? Is this one base product that I got add-ons for these people and add-ons for these people? Maybe, right? But what's much more common is that people think that they'll say, oh, I have this product. I'll tell you one. I got hired with this company, VP marketing, and head of product says to me, oh, you know what our biggest problem is? We have these two segments and they're totally different. We sell to retailers that want this thing, and we sell to utilities that want this other thing. And so we went and did interviews with, I think we did 30 customer interviews, 15 on both. But you know what was funny? The competitors were different, but the differentiated capabilities were the same, and the differentiated value was the same. So really, they looked like they were totally different target segments. We changed a little bit of the wording you would use over here for utilities was not quite the same, but the value was the same. The value was, if you have a catastrophic failure, you're going to get zero downtime with our product. On the retail side, the catastrophic failure was the cash registers don't work. On the utility side, catastrophic failure was the lights went out. But the value was actually the same. And so because the value was the same, our roadmap was all about solidifying that value and going deeper on that value pillar. And if you went to our homepage, we could talk about the value in a general way that solved both. And then if I was pitching a retail, even our sales pitches looked almost identical. It's just when we got into customer examples, if it was a retail company, I used the retail example. If it was utilities, I used the utilities example. And so that's way more common than you think. We think that it's different, but when we actually go through the positioning exercise, it turns out the same. And that would make sense for, in this case, it was a company doing 80 million revenue and it had been serving those two clients forever. Like, that makes sense that it was the same, because otherwise, again, we would have got this fork where at some point these people want this thing and these people want this thing, and I can't satisfy them both. And I'm trying to steer in the middle. And what I end up with is a product that doesn't satisfy either one very well. And now I'm losing.
Thank you. We have a lot of questions, but in the interest of time, I can take maybe one more question, I guess. So this is our last question for today, which is, how different is product positioning for a real product versus service as a product?
Sorry, what's product positioning for a real product versus
service as a product?
Oh yeah,
like,
a service
like IT
product.
consulting. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's interesting because my background's all product, right? So when I built this methodology for doing positioning, it's all product. And a lot of times we had services wrapper on those products. So it wasn't just a product, it was product and services. And we would count in the methodology, the step that was talking about differentiated capabilities, we would count all the stuff we could do in services as differentiated capabilities. And often, like in a couple of the markets I played in, products were kind of commodities, and really the differentiated value was coming from the services we could wrap around that. So we were listing those as capabilities and then mapping it to value. Here's where it gets really tricky though, is if you're just services, like I've worked now with a couple of companies that are just services. If it's like, so one company I worked with does custom software development. So we're like, well, we're looking at the competitors, and then we're looking at, well, what makes you different? And, there's a couple of guys in the room that are sort of saying, well, we can do anything. We just hire some people. There isn't anything we can't do. There's literally nothing we can't do. And I'm like, but that's not true, right? You don't have experience doing in all kinds of things. Like, you guys, you're not doing anything with artificial intelligence. Why would I pick you for artificial intelligence? And then the guy says, well, we could hire a person and then we'd be good at it. And I'm like, no one would pick you because you have zero experience there. So this step, differentiated capabilities, when you're a services business, is hard because you got to be honest with yourself. Like, what is a differentiated capability for us? Meaning we have some kind of expertise or a methodology or something that we've developed over time with our experience, and we can prove that we do this better than other people. Like we have this capability and the other folks don't. So, this one company I was working with does custom dev stuff. And one of their differentiated capabilities, they're really good at headless commerce systems. And so they've got 125 people on staff that are certified on commerce tools. That's a huge differentiated capability. No other competitor of theirs would have that many people certified on this particular platform. The value of that is they can very confidently come in and say, look, if you're doing a headless commerce project where you want to do something really bespoke customer experience on the web for commerce customers, we've got more experience in that than anyone else. We've got 125 people that are certified on this thing. We have a methodology that no one else has. The value of that is the likelihood of this project going sideways is very small. You should pick us because we know what we're doing. But it's hard. You got to be kind of honest with yourself about what you're good at and what you're not. It's not as easy. The products, it's easy. The feature either exists or it doesn't.
All right, April, thank you for sharing your time today. I think that's we're a little bit over time, but thank you for your time and your incredible expertise and sharing that with us. That was amazing. I think we had record attendance today, and I mean the chat has been filled with overwhelmingly positive feedback. I can definitely recommend April's book to everyone. It's a quick and accessible read, but it's very powerful, I think, in going deeper into the methodology that she discussed and then how to apply it to your own work. Everyone, thank you for joining. Please don't forget to fill out that survey to let us know what you think about these events and what you'd like in the future. If you want to go back and watch this again, we're going to post it recording in the next few weeks on the BPMA site. That's under events, and then you can scroll down and see past recordings, or just go straight to bostonproducts.org/videos. Lastly, please mark your calendars for February 22nd. That's the product quality talk, which should be great. And that's it. Thank you, everyone. Again, thank you, April. Have a great day.
Thanks so much. Thanks, everybody.